If it ended there, if they had just told us a few things that weren't entirely true, lo has so many meanings, se does so many things, there are so many causes of the subjunctive. If they had just pushed a little fantasy on us and left it at that, because it's a predicate adjective, because it's a linking verb, I wouldn't have to make this video. But that's not where it ends. That's not all they do. When we're confused by what they tell us because it doesn't match what we see in reality, and we ask them a question, rarely do they add the context that makes what they said true. They usually just repeat the same thing again, like a robot would, as if that's not what prompted our question in the first place. In last year's State of the Gringo address, I spoke about the subjunctive for 10 minutes. I talked about the causes and triggers, the acronyms, similar to what we discussed in this video. But shortly after posting that video, some teacher still swooped in on Facebook and left a comment that just said, emotions, doubt, cause and effect. Thanks, lady, I hadn't thought of that. When I pointed out that we see sentences all the time conveying emotion, doubt, and cause and effect, but no subjunctive, she replied, well, I've been a Spanish teacher for 25 years, blah, 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 and that's the best we've got. That's the best you've got? After 25 years? I didn't say that. I just asked her, you didn't watch the video, did you? No. Uh-huh. And I don't know how many times I've been there when a student asked why a particular sentence doesn't contain a direct object, and the answer they got was, because the verb is intransitive. Oh my God. That tells us nothing. That's circular logic. The Spanish authority says a verb is intransitive when the sentence doesn't contain a direct object. So telling us a certain sentence doesn't contain a direct object because the verb is intransitive is like saying, that sentence doesn't contain a direct object because it doesn't contain a direct object. Thanks, teach. Circular logic aside, in general, the more nomenclature an answer contains, the worse the answer is. When a student asks me why a particular sentence doesn't contain a direct object, I don't include the terms bodily movement verb or existential verb in my answer unless I'm 100% certain the other person knows what those terms mean. Even then, I still help them see the logic of why that sentence doesn't contain a direct object. That for whatever reason, consciously or subconsciously, the speaker omitted the direct object from their sentence. Maybe because it's so duh that people are people, dogs are dogs, or shoes are shoes, or that we cry tears, cough coughs, and sneeze sneezes. Whatever the specific reason is, I help them see that. Because once we can see the logic of what's happening in one sentence, we not only understand the logic of what's happening in that sentence, we also understand the logic of what's happening in every sentence like it. You know the expression, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime? Does that apply here? I feel like it does. I wanted to. But it's not just teachers. If it were just teachers that told us stuff that isn't true and pushed their fantasy world on us, I probably still wouldn't be making this video right now. Over the last 18 months, as I went through online forums and Facebook groups hunting down the answers to my grammar questions, interacting with people, I couldn't help but notice the people who said stuff like, because the verb is intransitive, most of the time, they weren't teachers. Most of the time, they were one of us, a fellow gringo, a fellow Spanish learner. So first, we accept their simple statements devoid of all context as the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Then, without any bad intentions, we do it because we want to help, we spread the delusion to others. We're stuck in a cycle. First, we're the students, then we become the teachers. We are the teachers. The teachers are us. And when I say we, I'm not just being diplomatic. This is so embarrassing. Promise not to judge me? In the past, when somebody asked me about se, I would tell them, oh, se is so complicated. There are so many ses. Se does so many different things. I used to say what they say. And this one really makes me want to puke. I remember saying on at least one occasion, oh, it's hard to explain what the subjunctive even is. The subjunctive is just a feeling. And most of the time, it's not teachers that freak out and start arguing with me when I say the dictionary follows us, we don't follow the dictionary. I know that's not what we've been led to believe or what we're used to hearing, but it's true. Think about it. When enough of us use a new word, the dictionary adds that new word. When enough of us use an old word a new way, the dictionary adds that new definition. And when enough of us stop using a word, the dictionary eventually drops that word. The dictionary follows us, we don't follow it. Don't shoot the messenger? Plus, even if we did follow the dictionary, which one would we follow? There are so many dictionaries out there, each containing different words, and often they even have different definitions for the same words. Don't get me wrong, I love me a dictionary. I even married a dictionary once. Long story. But reality is reality. The dictionary is an awesome resource. It tells us the most common ways people currently use the most common words. But it's just a guide. It's not the word of God. Talking about the dictionary reminds me of the can-may crowd. My buddy Chris sent me this meme the other day, probably just to rile me up. Mission accomplished. Can I borrow a pencil? I don't know. Can you? We've all been there, right? The teacher wanted the the student to say may instead of can. A link to the meme is in the description, but in short, the student gave a great retort, to which the teacher gave what I can only assume they thought was an even better one. I wouldn't have let the teacher off the hook so easily though. Even if words did have specific set meanings, they don't. And even if we did follow the dictionary, we don't. All the dictionaries I've ever checked specifically define the word can as to have the physical ability to do something or to have permission to do something. Even though, in this case, the dictionary supports me, it still doesn't matter. We don't follow the dictionary. The dictionary follows us. What matters is, in the real world, in current times, polite, educated, well-spoken people use the word can both ways. And that's because to have the physical ability to do something and to have permission to do something are both just two slightly different ways of saying the same thing, to be able to. That's the central core idea that the verb can represents. And that's why, in Spanish, the verb poder, which means to be able to, can mean, or may mean, to have the physical ability to do something or to have permission to do something. Now, even though that meme involved a teacher, in my experience, most of the time somebody pulls the can-may thing on us, it's not a teacher. Again, it's one of us. When I talked about the subjunctive in last year's State of the Gringo address, I used this example. I don't know if I can eat anymore. This sentence is confusing because in Spanish, it can be translated with the subjunctive or without the subjunctive. And the reason is, in the real world, we use the verb can two different ways. At least two different ways. When can means to have the physical ability to do something, I don't know if I can eat anymore is translated with the subjunctive. No sé si pueda comer más. Pueda is a subjunctive conjugation of poder. But when can means to have permission to do something, I don't know if I can eat anymore is translated without the subjunctive. No sé si puedo comer más. Puedo is a normal conjugation of poder. But after I posted that video, I got an email from a student saying that can mean allowed to. Well, that's not quite correct. May is allowed to, can is able to. Small distinction. Now I kinda know this lady, she's a nice lady, but come on, when somebody asks me why that sentence can be translated with or without the subjunctive, am I supposed to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question, one of those translations is illegal? What's sad is, when we go around incorrectly correcting people like this, we're not so different from cheaters. When one student copies all of another student's answers on a test, if they get all the answers right, it's harder to detect that somebody cheated. But if they don't get all the answers right, so they even have the same wrong answers, it's pretty obvious one of them cheated. What I'm saying is, unless everybody that does the can-may thing all come separately to the same wrong conclusion, they're a bunch of cheater, pumpkin eater, incorrect correctors. And what's a cheater again? That's right, a cheater is somebody who mindlessly repeats somebody else's answer without putting any thought into the topic themselves. Sound familiar? At times, we can all be copycat cheater, incorrect correctors. I promise this video isn't just about me complaining. In a few minutes, we'll get to the plan and the solutions. But it's a plan and solutions for a problem. We have a problem. We have to admit that. It's tricky. I'm telling you, stop. We too easily believe what people tell us. But then I'm also saying, stop. We too easily doubt what people tell us. It depends on the context. What can I say? Reality is complicated. If learning is giving context to new information as we encounter it, then we're really bad at learning. If context is reality, then we're really bad at seeing reality. We're constantly accepting these simple statements or one single perspective as the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Sometimes we give automatic credibility to an authority figure. We assume the shoe guy is a shoe expert. Other times we accept contextual if-then statements without the context, like we do with lo and se and the subjunctive. And sometimes we even accept inconsistent, convoluted, I'm sorry, but delusional nomenclature. That is a pretty house. That is pretty. Telling us that in the second example, there's no direct object, so is must be a magical linking verb is like finding a dinosaur skeleton without the leg bones and concluding that it must be a magical flying dinosaur, even though somebody else just found the same skeleton last week with the leg bones and it was classified as a normal, not flying dinosaur. Yay or nay on the analogy? As far as accepting the delusion and giving automatic credibility to authority, I think we mainly do it because we're lazy. I'm actually serious this time. It's human nature or something. It would be so tiring to have to constantly think about all the context of every statement or all the different hypothetical perspectives in a situation. It beats me though why we're so willing to repeat the same stuff they repeat to us, even though we know we have no clue what we're talking about. I used to say the same stuff they say about set and the subjunctive. That's so embarrassing. And I have no clue why we're so willing to play the role expected of us, even when we know we have no idea what we're doing, like I did at the shoe store that night, though not as embarrassing as the set and subjunctive thing. And as authority figures, when somebody is confused by what we tell them or has a question, we often just repeat the same thing to them again. And as students, we keep going back to the same source for help. Would we we keep going to that same shoe guy for the same shoe test if we always came home with blisters? Oh wait, I'm the shoe guy. I kept going back to those same subjunctive causes, triggers, and acronyms even though they confused the bejeebers out of me. They never made any sense. It was different than with ser versus a star and por versus para and all the other hard stuff. I didn't consider for a second that intransitive verbs weren't really a thing, even though all the evidence was there. I just kept trying to understand what these people were talking about when they told me because the verb is intransitive. Again, mainly because I was lazy, I never went back to the grammar, I never took a closer look myself, I never put in the work. Until I did. I hope you're starting to see this isn't one big us versus them thing. This isn't just good guys versus bad guys. Okay, that's kinda sorta what this is, but the two sides are fluid. Sometimes we're us, but sometimes we're them. Sometimes we're the good guys, but sometimes we're the bad guys. People ask me all the time, who is the Spanish authority? I've never answered that question before. I'm gonna answer it right now though. I'm gonna take off the Spanish authority's mask and reveal to the world who is responsible for such pure evilness. People think it's the dictionary. Is it the dictionary? Things get a little weird when I show them this picture. No, the dictionary isn't the Spanish authority. The dictionary is our friend, our abused friend. When we mindlessly repeat to others what was mindlessly repeated to us, even though we know we have no clue what we're talking about, even though we know we've put zero thought into the topic ourselves, and even though it's not true, when we stop people mid-sentence to incorrectly correct them, when somebody is confused or asks a question and we keep repeating the same thing over and over, what I'm saying is, the dictionary, no. The grammar book, yes. The grammar book, yes. Our teachers, yes. Every last one of them. You, unless you're unlike every human I've ever met in my entire life, then yes, yes you. And me? Yes. Sometimes even I'm the Spanish authority. We're all the Spanish authority. There is no Spanish authority. I use that term mockingly. The dictionaries and grammar books all follow us. We don't follow them. Even the Royal Academy of whatever, they follow us too. Or actually, they follow native Spanish speakers. Wouldn't be a good idea to follow us. But when Spanish speakers start speaking a different way, the Royal Academy of whatever will eventually reflect that change. What's going on is, we've all heard it before, language is this living thing. And sure, it's living or not, whatever. But what's definitely true is, we're living, and we're all different, and we all use language differently. Language is constantly changing and morphing according to billions of living human beings. So any attempt to dictate how one person speaks or doesn't speak, well, this ain't math. 2 + 2 = 5? That's wrong. That doesn't match reality. But saying I write good instead of I write well, that's not the same thing. Sure, it's wrong, but not really. Both these sentences tell us the same thing about reality. Neither is more effective at transmitting the message than the other. My dad would never say I write good, and when somebody asks him how he's doing, he would never say, I'm good. Luckily for me, my dad takes pride in the way he speaks. But interestingly, I have noticed he has started to say, I'm good in another situation. Like, you want something from the store, Dad? No thanks, I'm good. I'm pretty sure that's a new way of talking, for him and in general. I don't think he would have said that 10 years ago. It started with the youngsters, nah, I'm good. Now even my dad says it. And no, when my dad says I'm good, he's not saying he's well behaved or that he tastes good. And I'm not saying don't try to speak perfectly. Try to speak perfectly. I'm just saying there's no Spanish authority. The dictionaries, the grammar books, the Royal Academy of whatever, and yes, even our teachers, they're not teaching Old English, are they? They all follow us, even though we are the teachers and the teachers are us. You know what I mean. What's weird is they just can't accept it. That's why I mocked them. I was shocked last year when I read that there are actually two different philosophies when it comes to grammar. There's prescriptive grammar and there's descriptive grammar. I was like, no way. Prescriptive grammar explains how certain people think a language should be used or require it to be used, whereas descriptive grammar focuses on how a language is actually used by speakers and writers. I'll let you figure out which side is which. Bottom line, there is no Spanish authority, but unfortunately, it seems like we're all hardwired to accept delusion and spread delusion. And when we do that, we're the bad guys. Sometimes we're all the Spanish authority. This video is about us versus them, but first, we need to get our own houses in order. First, it's us versus ourselves. We can do better. We deserve better. They deserve better. It's us versus ourselves. Then we fight, fight, fight. Are you in? You want to talk about God again? Let's talk about God again. I personally don't believe that anybody or anything with intentions is responsible for the world, or the universe, or the multiverse, or whatever. And as is common with non-believers like myself, I used to get upset, hostile, or defensive at the mere mention of God. So recently, when my friend told me how upset she was that her daughter came home from school saying, Mommy, God created the trees. Mommy, God created the flowers, I kind of felt like the Dalai Lama. I understood why my friend was upset. In the past, that would have pissed me off too. true. How can they teach that? God didn't make the flowers, the seed, nutrients, water, photosynthesis, blah blah blah. But now I know that words don't mean words, not to mention I've been watching lots of physics videos on YouTube. And it's my understanding that everything on this planet, including flowers, can be traced back to the Big Bang and everything that came from the Big Bang, like stars and stuff. So all the elements on the periodic table, which is what everything is made of, I think, came from the Big Bang. First, that's fun to think about. But second, as far as I know, even the most advanced experts on this stuff don't claim to know what happened at the time of the Big Bang. After the Big Bang, though not right after it, they're both confident and fuzzy about things. It depends on the context, on what specifically we're talking about. But it's my understanding that nobody has even the faintest idea what came before the Big Bang, or what came before that, or before that. You know when somebody combines two foods that don't normally go together, sometimes we say, well, it all goes to the same place. Or is that just my mom? I feel like that kind of works here, like we all end up at the same place. Who or what made the flowers? Yes, the seed, water, photosynthesis, and all that mumbo jumbo, but who or what made the seed? And who or what made that? When we keep digging, when we keep going further back, then what made that? We all end up at the same place. What caused the Big Bang? Nobody knows. And to me, that unknown, infinity, negative infinity, call it whatever you want, the force that created that force, stars keep burning. That's crazy in and of itself. They just keep burning. And we magically go around one. That's insane. Gravity is insane. That's God. Who cares? Don't get me wrong. When we're trying to figure out something specific, we need to be able to test it and verify that it does the same thing every time. We need to be able to predict things and test our predictions. But when a 5-year-old says God made the flowers, as a non-believer myself, I think it's okay to be okay with that and not be a sellout or intellectually dishonest or anything negative. In a way, God did make the flowers. Whatever caused the Big Bang, that's also what made the flowers. And for the record, the seed and all that stuff made the flowers too. God is just a word. Like I said before, it would be so tiring to have to look for all the context in every situation or every perspective possible. I get it. Context is reality, and we can never have all the context. But when there's a meeting of two ideas, when there's confusion, discussion, debate, confrontation, one perspective isn't enough. One perspective is the problem. When there's confusion, discussion, debate, confrontation, it's our job as human beings to have two perspectives, at least two perspectives, two minimum. Now, of course, that's easier said than done sometimes. Our minds are manipulative little things. Our egos and insecurities constantly work to convince us that we're the good guy, that we're right, that the other person is wrong. But we can always find what we're looking for, and once we see something from a certain perspective, it's difficult to see it from any other perspective. Tunnel vision. The only way to fight against that is to fight against it. The best way to battle our propensity to see things only one way is to not just look for how we're wrong, but to love being wrong. I love being wrong. Being wrong is the best. The times I realize I'm wrong about something, those are the only moments in life I can be 100% certain I'm closer to being right. And I love being right even more than I love being wrong. If I'm wrong, I want to know I'm wrong so I can switch sides and be right next time. My best strategy for getting conscious and seeing reality better is when two things seem like they're the same, we need to look for how they're different. And when two things seem different, we need to look for how they're the same. In this world, no two things are 100% exactly the same, otherwise they'd be the same thing. So when somebody says that two things are the same, that doesn't mean they're the same in every way, only in the way the speaker is talking about, whatever their point is. But it doesn't mean their comparison is automatically a good one. I'm still curious what you thought of that dinosaur analogy, by the way. This might seem like self-serving advice or advice specific to lots of the topics I talked about in this video, but this kind of thinking is how I figured all that stuff out, that all the different meanings of low are the same, that there's only one sa, and everything else. They're the same? Great. Now how are they different? Oh, they're different. Awesome. How are they the same? You don't always hit gold, of course. I didn't know I was gonna see any of the stuff I saw, but sometimes you do. Sometimes you see stuff in the grammar and the words are less confusing. Sometimes you see, in a way, God did make the flowers and the world is more peaceful. Namaste. Now I gotta say, I'm still a moron. Ask any of my friends. I say that for two reasons. One, I feel super snobby and like a know-it-all talking like this. But two, more importantly, I don't think I'm open-minded. That's not a thing. Well, it kinda is, but it's a situation-specific thing. Being open-minded, looking for that second perspective, we can practice and get better at it, but it's a never-ending job. The new situations keep popping up, and with the ones that do repeat, we never have all the context. I'm still a moron. I'm just less of a moron than I used to be, but hopefully more of a moron than I'll be tomorrow. This next strategy definitely helps with learning Spanish, and it might help with other stuff too, I'm not sure. When they say something different in Spanish than we say in English, we often ask, why do they say this? Why do they say that? But it's usually more productive to ask, why not? Why wouldn't they or couldn't they say it that way? Even within a language, even using mostly the same words, we can usually say the same thing multiple ways. Jimmy made the pizza was made by Jimmy. Why would somebody say it the second way when they could say it the first way? Well, why not? Both sentences tell us the same thing about the world. Or sometimes, just as good, we can ask ourselves, why do we say it that way in English? I'm not saying these questions are magic buttons buttons, but they do put our minds on the right track. They kind of force us, or at least pressure us, to look for that second perspective. They encourage us to do some investigating in our minds, in the dictionary, wherever. Somebody recently asked me why they say llegar a la estación de tren when we say arrive at the train station. In Spanish, they use the preposition a, which usually means to, but we use the preposition at. They say arrive to the station, we say arrive at the station. In the past, I would have answered because we use prepositions arbitrarily sometimes. We're all the Spanish authority. And while that might be true sometimes, it's not as true as I once believed it to be. There's usually a logical reason for everything. The key with verbs is to figure out their historical meaning. In Spanish, these days, they do say llegar when we say to arrive, but that's different than its historical meaning. It turns out llegar comes from Latin, and in Latin, llegar basically means to apply, to add, to attach. See what's going on? When we say Jimmy arrives at the train station, they do say Jimmy llega a la estación de tren, but that more literally means Jimmy added himself to the train station, or Jimmy attached himself to the train station. That's why they use a in Spanish with llegar in this context. The cool thing is, arriving at this new perspective, or attaching myself to this new perspective, took me 1 minute. I just typed etymology llegar into the Google search box. I don't like saying the word etymology though. It's impossible to say without sounding snobby. That's why I say the history of llegar. But when searching, it's better to use the word etymology. When there's confusion, discussion, debate, confrontation, whether it's about God or a Spanish sentence, one perspective isn't enough. And we can't rely on the other person or anybody else. It's on us. We must look for that second perspective ourselves, whether we're the student with the confusion or the teacher in charge of clearing it away. If we want it, we gotta do the work, in school and in life. Okay, enough woo-woo. In my world, we practice descriptive grammar, not prescriptive grammar. In my world, I describe for you how people actually speak, not slang and that stuff. Most Spanish books, classes, and courses only talk about grammar and vocab, but there are 3 pieces to the language puzzle, not 2. There's grammar and vocab, then there's logic. In my world, subjects do verbs to direct objects. That's the framework of every sentence. Don't get me wrong, there's more going on than what I've shown you in this video. We barely talked about indirect objects, prepositions, or conjunctions. But this subject, verb, direct object thing still holds. Of course, some sentences contain more than one clause, they have more than one verb, but in those sentences, in reality, each verb has a subject and each verb has a direct object. The cool thing is, with multiple clause sentences, when we fill in any missing context, so the sentences fit the framework, subjects do verbs to direct objects, when we rewrite multiple clause sentences in the language of reality, we don't need to use all the complicated nomenclature the Spanish authority uses. Instead of saying noun clause, adjective clause, adverbial clause, and there are way more, we just say clause, or actually main clause and not main clause. Nice and simple. The thing is, with multiple clause sentences, the only way to see what's really going on is to look at them 2 different ways, from 2 different perspectives. Sound familiar? We have to see what's going on in each clause and in the whole sentence, all the clauses together. In our sentences, we combine clauses, we embed clauses, we do all kinds of stuff. In my premium course, Logical Spanish, I call this Camera 1, Camera 2. When we're looking at the whole sentence, it's like a wide-angle camera shot where you can see the whole scene, the whole football game or whatever. Then, when we're looking at the individual clauses, it's like the zoomed-in shots where you can see just one player or a couple players. It'd be hard to follow the game without both views. I already told you about the Spanish quickies I have coming. First, a series on the parts of speech, then a series on phrases, clauses, and sentences. Do you see why now? It's all about that strong foundation. And all those videos will be in English. We're in this situation in the first place because we don't know how English really works. We need to know how English works because we're learning Spanish in English. We're constantly comparing Spanish sentences to English sentences and asking why. The Spanish authority usually tells us that's just how it is. Now I'm telling you there's almost always a logical reason for everything. Even though those videos will be in English, I bet you'll have at least one aha moment in each. To make sure you don't miss any of my future videos, sign up for the Spanish Dude newsletter at SpanishDude.com/newsletter. Then my premium course, Logical Spanish, picks up where the Spanish quickies leave off, with the actual Spanish. Language is a 3-piece puzzle: grammar, vocab, logic, and Logical Spanish covers all 3. We start with nouns, then verbs, then adjectives, and so on. It's a very organized course. Go in there, press play on the first video, then follow my instructions, video 2, video 3, etc. With my free videos, I give you the gist of everything, but in Logical Spanish, we go way beyond the gist. Like with adjectives, on YouTube, I have a couple videos on adjectives. In Logical Spanish, there are 2 entire modules on adjectives, about 15 videos. I cover adjective placement, adjective matching, the numbers, possessive adjectives, demonstrative adjectives. I address the big before-after question. When do we put the adjective before the noun, and when do we put the adjective after the noun? What's the difference between un buen chico and un chico bueno? That's something I didn't know until last year. In Logical Spanish, I'm covering everything a normal grammar book or Spanish course covers, my way of of course, but then we also go over the logic of it all, how to get to the language of reality no matter what the words in a sentence tell us. If you're a lifetime member, you already have access to Logical Spanish. Just sign into the premium course area and you'll see it right away. If you're not a lifetime member, you can become one right now at SpanishDude.com/lifetime, or you can enroll in just the Logical Spanish course at SpanishDude.com/logical. All these links are below this video or in the description. Okay, last thing, the big issues. Once you really know how the parts of speech work and how they work together, I'm going to do a third series of Spanish quickies on just the big issues. Ser versus estar, preterite versus imperfect, ser versus estar in the past, por versus para, le versus lo versus se, and the subjunctive. Even the ones I've already covered, I'm going to cover again with fresh eyes. And along with each big issue video, there will be what I'm calling a reality check worksheet. If you're a teacher and can't just order new books, you can print out these reality check worksheets and put them in the right spot in the current book. When you're talking about se, you can give the students the reality check worksheet on se or on object pronouns. The reality check worksheets will contain the context that makes all the stuff the book says true. It'll show them how all the different ses, while definitely different, are the same. That way they see all the different situations we use se in, important, but also get the context that connects all those different ses logically, also important. And there will be versions of every reality check worksheet without any branding. No name, no website, no email, just a white paper with writing that, as a teacher, I'm assuming you can hand out to your students or insert in the textbook. So that's the deal. If you've tried to learn Spanish before and quit, try again. If you were just lazy and didn't do any work, that's on you. But if you ever encountered a sentence where you knew all the words and you knew all the grammar, but still didn't understand how it all went together or how to put it all together, look again with fresh eyes. And speaking of fresh eyes, if you made it this far, thank you. I say I speak your language, but if you're still here, that's only because you speak my language. We're all always delusional, but at least you and I both want to speak the language of reality. That's a good start. But now it's time. Does the ball stop rolling because it gets tired, or is it because of friction? Do nouns just disappear from thin air, or are they always really there? When you're ready, I want you to walk out into this big, beautiful world of ours. Look around, talk to people, watch movies, read books, listen to music, focus on the words, take them all in with fresh eyes. Then, only when you're ready, I want you to tell me, message me, leave me a comment, tell me, whose world do you live in? Theirs or mine?